So again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being with us today for this panel discussion on the Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury. My name is Britney Huelbig, and I have a few housekeeping items to start us off with. First, as you likely heard Zoom announce, this presentation is being recorded, and the recording will be circulated to everyone who registered once it is available. We do ask that you stay muted this afternoon unless you're asking a question. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat or raise your hand via the Zoom feature, and we will have time toward the end of today's discussion for our wonderful panelists to address questions live. Finally, we do encourage everyone to participate today in a manner that emphasizes civic engagement. And so I am very pleased now to welcome Presiding Judge Julie Emede. Judge Emede was appointed to the Superior Court bench in 2009, and she has previously served in or supervised the Criminal Domestic Violence Court, the Provisional Remedies and Appellate Division, Probate Court, Family Court, and Misdemeanor Court. As presiding judge, she now oversees court operations and the grand jury and ensures the proper administration of justice as outlined by the California Rules of Court. Thank you for joining us, Judge Emede.
Thank you, Brittany, for that introduction and for all the work that you do with the civil grand jury. It is my pleasure to be with you today to talk about the important work that is done in our community by the civil grand jury. I appreciate your interest in this topic and hope to provide an introduction about what service on the civil grand jury will mean. I do want to mention briefly that we are not talking about criminal grand jury service today. The criminal grand jury has a different selection process and purpose. The criminal grand jury is selected from the regular jury pool, like when you receive a jury summons in the mail, to consider whether there is sufficient evidence to indict a person for a crime. The civil grand jury, on the other hand, is an examining and investigative body that makes recommendations to improve systems, procedures, and methods of operations of local government. The primary functions of the civil grand jury, and the most important reasons for its existence, are examining all aspects of county government, seeing that the public's monies are handled judiciously, and ensuring that all accounts are properly audited. Put simply, the role of the civil grand jury is to guarantee honest, efficient government in the best interests of the people. As it is set up today, the civil grand jury is part of the judicial branch of government. And although grand juries are part of the judicial system and grand jurors are considered to be officers of the court, the grand jury is an entirely independent body. While the court and county counsel and other attorneys act as advisors to the civil grand jury, we cannot direct or prevent the actions of the civil grand jury so long as the civil grand jury operates within the law. Having said that, the court does play an important role with the grand jury, and while the court has many grand jury related responsibilities, I'm going to talk about 4 of those today. First, the court must assemble the grand jury by recruiting and interviewing potential grand jurors. Eligibility for service on the civil grand jury is governed by California law. We will then select grand jurors by draw from the pool of qualifying applicants. Citizens serve on the civil grand jury for 1 full year. Second, the court must then impanel the selected grand jury and charge it with its duties. Third, the court will consult with and advise the grand jury upon request of the grand jury. And lastly, the court will receive the civil grand jury's final reports and review them for compliance with the law to be sure that such reports do not extend beyond the legal boundaries of the civil grand jury's power. The sole function of this review is to prevent official filing of an illegal report. Now, there are 3 aspects of serving on the civil grand jury I want to highlight today: confidentiality, avoiding conflicts and bias, and the commitment obligation. First, confidentiality. Because of the nature of the grand jury's work, much of it must be conducted in closed session. Grand jurors are sworn to secrecy, thus assuring all who appear before the grand jury that their complaints will be handled in an entirely confidential manner. To ensure confidentiality, no one, including me, may be present during the sessions of the grand jury except those permitted by law. The minutes of its meetings may not be inspected by anyone, and the civil grand jury's records may not be subpoenaed. As to avoiding conflicts and bias, because of the grand jury's extraordinary fact-finding powers and the sensitivity of many of its activities, grand jurors must be careful to avoid involvement in areas where an actual or perceived conflict of interest might exist. Avoiding conflicts and the appearance of conflicts protects the integrity of an investigation, protects the grand jury as an institution, and protects individuals from civil or criminal penalties. In addition to avoiding conflicts of interest, a grand juror must not have an identifiable bias regarding any actions the grand jury may take. Bias is a prejudgment of essential facts that prevents a grand juror from considering an issue objectively. No member of the grand jury should use or appear to use the position for any kind of personal gain or advantage. In fact, members must not identify themselves as grand jurors in matters other than those directly connected with grand jury business. And lastly, I want to talk about the time commitment. I am always impressed with the folks that apply to participate and serve on the civil grand jury. You'll hear from some of our hardworking jurors shortly. They make a commitment to be available to serve 20 to 25 hours per week for a year. While there's a per diem reimbursement and some costs are covered, it is at its heart volunteer work on behalf of the community. The grand jurors you will hear from today will also tell you why they do it. While it is a significant commitment of time and energy, it can also be very rewarding. Thank you so much for your attention to this very simple overview of a very complicated subject. The other folks you'll hear from today will be able to address your more specific questions. Most importantly, I look forward to meeting in interviews with those of you who decide to apply to be on the civil grand jury. Before I turn it back over to Britney, I'd like to thank our current civil grand jury members who are here today to share their insights, both for being here today and also for their important and diligent service on the civil grand jury. Unfortunately, I'm not able to stay with you for the remainder of the webinar, but I know that you are in good hands. With that, I will turn it back over to Britney.
Thank you, Judge Emede, for those insightful remarks and for helping us all continue to learn more about this important institution. As Judge Emede mentioned, we are very fortunate to have with us today an esteemed group of panelists who serve on the Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury, and they are here to share their experiences and insights with you. Our panelists have extensive experience firsthand with the work of the civil grand jury, and I'm confident that we'll all gain valuable insight into the crucial work they do. So before we dive in, I'm going to start to spotlight each panelist, and I ask that you please unmute yourself and give a brief introduction. Joanne?
Hello, it's nice to meet all of you, and I hope you really do think about joining the grand jury. I am, again, Joanne Polverino. I am from San Jose, and I actually served a first term on last year's grand jury, and I found it so rewarding. I was selected to be a carryover.
Thank you. And Leslie?
Thank you, Brittany. Leslie Lambert. I have never served on any form of jury in the past, not even a courtroom jury. So this was a new experience for me. And I am from the city of Campbell, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. And Lauren?
My name is Lauren Diamond, and I am born and raised in San Jose, living in Santa Clara these days. Like Joanne, I served last year on my first term, and then this year I'm serving as the foreperson of the civil grand jury.
Thank you, Lauren. And Jim?
Hello, I'm Jim McCann. I'm happy to see everybody here. And I, like Leslie, had never served on any kind of jury before, so was really interested in this opportunity. But I did spend 6 years working at Gilroy City Hall, and then following that, another almost 24 at Santa Clara Valley Water District, now known as Valley Water. So well versed in local government operations from the other side of the desk.
Thank you, Jim. And Susan.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Barnes, and I live in San Jose. I am formally trained in criminology, but I've been working in local government, serving an economic development function for about 20 years in the city of Palo Alto, San Jose, and Hayward. I feel that, there have been a number of opportunities to serve on the jury, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve on the grand jury now.
Wonderful. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Tom.
Hi, my name is Thomas Lee. I've lived in Santa Clara County, primarily Mountain View, for more than 30 years, and I was an engineer and never served on a trial jury, and only heard about the civil grand jury shortly before I applied a couple of years ago. We're a little bit more than halfway done with our term over here, and so far it's been a very rewarding experience.
Thank you. Thank you to each of you for that introduction. As I think you've heard already, each of these panelists brings a unique perspective to our conversation today. Before we get started, though, we do want to remind everyone that specific civil grand jury investigations and the information not contained in final reports must remain confidential. Our panel is well versed in their obligations around that and in that charge that Judge Emede mentioned at the start of our conversation. So while we will be discussing various aspects of the role and the process, we felt it important to note that case details will be left out of our conversation today. So our first question is, please tell us a bit about your background and how it prepared you for service on the civil grand jury. And Tom, I'd like to ask you to go first this time.
Okay. Like I said, I was an engineer. I'm retired now. I had like most of my experience, at least more recently, was in kind of the area of managing a group of people and working in a team. And I feel that uh, as far as preparing myself for the service in the grand jury, that actually kind of worked very well for me in terms of being able to work and with a wide variety of people, and uh, uh, kind of listening to lots of different ideas, um, uh, and part of it also is kind of the technical aspect, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Um, uh, as far as using, like we're using Zoom right now to communicate. We do a lot of video conferencing as part of this as civil grand jury, and so I think part of that helped me get used to this whole um, group dynamic online.
Great, thank you. Can I ask Jim and then Susan to tell us a little bit about your background and how it prepared you for this role?
Sure. I mean, as I mentioned, I spent 6 years at Gilroy City Hall and then another 24 or so up at Valley Water. And I was peripherally aware of the civil grand jury just because being part of a local government agency, there was some attention over the years. And so I was aware when a report was released, how it applied to our agency or had to post it on our website or something like that. So never, I wasn't planning on, once I retired on going in and applying for the grand jury, but once the opportunity arose, I saw how good a fit it might be, and was very interested in that. So it's proving, the opportunity is proving to be truly one that memorable and inspiring in a way. So we'll hear more later, I think. Thanks.
Good afternoon. As I mentioned also, I worked in local government for 20 years, and I think my background in report writing and working in collaboration with colleagues with the ability to digest complex issues has been extremely helpful. This year, there have been a number of committees that were formed, and I think as well as the investigations, it's allowing people to find the niche where they fit and where their skills fit. I was an alternate and I didn't expect to serve. So it was important to be committed to the grand jury as described, even as an alternate. For me, I attended the required trainings and began service in September, not July. Even with the late start, my colleagues were welcoming and I was able to get up to speed quickly to take part in the grand jury's activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And we are very grateful for the commitment from our alternates as well. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Moving on to our next question, what is the role of the civil grand jury? And Lauren, can you please start us off?
Sure. I think Judge Emede did a really great job of kind of explaining what the civil grand jury does. But just to kind of add on to that a little bit, really our goal is to kind of be the watchdog for the county. And so we investigate local government and make sure that they're being held accountable. And we do that through doing interviews, we can do document requests. We get complaints in from citizens in the county and we look into those. We also may have our own ideas of things that we'd like to look into as a body. And so that's really kind of our day-to-day charge, is just to be monitoring local government and making sure they're held accountable. Joanne, did you want to add?
The only thing I could add is that we do issue reports and we look at a lot of different things as a body. That doesn't necessarily mean that we will issue a report on that. And the investigative piece is a big piece of it. And the other thing I would just mention that was mentioned by Judge Emede as well is the confidentiality. That is very, very critical to the work we do. And it stays with us, so to speak, for life. So once you're off, you aren't relieved from the confidentiality duty. And I have to say personally, my friends know I serve on the civil grand jury and everybody respects that. There seems to be an understanding that when you say I can't talk about it, I haven't found anybody that really pries. They really appreciate, the work that we do. The other thing too is if you're really curious about more about the work, you can go to the grand jury's website through the Santa Clara County Superior Court and just take a look at the topics. You don't have to look at just last year's, but some of them are quite interesting. So it gives you a feel for the end product of what we do. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for mentioning that, Joanne. I did drop the website in the chat for those who are interested. But so now that we understand a bit about the role, let's talk about preparation. Susan, can you tell us a bit about what was required for you to prepare for service on the grand jury? Did you need any specific credentials?
No specific credentials are needed to be a member of the grand jury, but there are some requirements like being a U.S. citizen, and those other requirements are on the website. There were varied backgrounds this year, and I was impressed with how the varied backgrounds lent themselves to good outcomes in addressing important issues in the county. As mentioned, it's really important also that you allocate this 20 to 25 hours per week for grand jury service. Although the scheduling is flexible, you need to have the time to devote to civil grand jury meetings and work. Some characteristics were mentioned on the website that I'm going to mention now, and those are open-mindedness with willingness to consider different viewpoints, an interest and ability to work with others, genuine interest in community affairs, an interest in investigative skills, and an ability to write a report. Many different backgrounds have these important skills that prepare you for service with the grand jury, and I think these transferable skills make people effective grand jurors.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Joanne, can you share from your perspective about, what's required by way of background for a grand juror, or if there are requirements?
I would like to say that Susan did cover really a majority of what I think you need to consider, what I considered when I applied, and rather than just repeat everything she said, the other thing I could add is it's the richness of everybody that makes this whole jury work. Everybody brings different skills and ability, and that richness is what makes the grand jury very effective. And I also think if you're curious, curiosity is a good thing. If you are looking at something, if you want to join this, and also learning. This is an excellent, it's been referred to as an advanced lesson in civics. And I can tell you, you'll never read the paper the same way. So it's something that does carry on with you, and not other than, the citizenship and those requirements. What you bring is valuable.
Well stated. Lauren, did you have anything to add to that?
I would just echo what Joanne said, that, this is a body of 19. And so it really, the differences in all of our backgrounds and experiences are really what makes this kind of a rich experience for everybody. And so I think just coming in with a willingness to learn and listen and understand that working as a team of 19 isn't always going to be easy. But, you just have to be open-minded and willing to hear other people out. And if you do that, then it's a really, really great experience.
Spoken like a true four-person. Thank you, Lauren. So we've heard a little bit about this time commitment. So I'm hoping to pose a question about work-life balance. Leslie, from your perspective, how have vacations, time off, and scheduling worked as a grand juror? And are you able to balance your time based on other obligations?
Thanks, Brittany. Yes, the time commitment, as Judge Emede outlined, 20 to 25 hours a week, is real. So, but it does ebb and flow depending on where we are in the time of year and the different committees that you may be a member of. There's because of the team aspect, we work in committees. It's not single-threaded. You're not just one person who's being dependent upon anything. You have your teammates and committee members to work with. So if you need time off, you can't make a meeting because of family commitments or vacation, doctor's appointments, other types of activities, that's always available. And there's never any weird pressure at all for you to say show up or else. There's nothing like that. It's very, very accommodating. And I think my colleagues here have talked about the collegiality of the jury. It's kind of a magic experience to pull together 19 people from all over. We didn't know one another, and yet we get along famously. And I think it's really due to the careful and very interesting interview process that goes through. So it's never a problem. It's always accommodating, and we have folks who back up each other on various tasks. So it's easy.
Thanks, Leslie. Jim, can you share some thoughts on managing time as a grand juror?
Yes, sure. I totally agree with what Leslie just said. And I mean, I'm an example of, there was a couple of long weekends that we had scheduled that I went ahead and took. And one of as you can see, being here on Zoom, and as Tom mentioned, a lot of I'd say most of our work is done virtually now. One of the unexpected, you might call it, benefit or outcome of COVID is that it's possible. So, sure, we might have 5 or 6 meetings a week, but almost all of it is done or could be done from your home office or wherever you like to work. We do get together, when possible, at least once a month, and that's always good. But if you need to be away, everybody is very, very accommodating to that. And if it's, if you feel like you can or want to virtually join from somewhere else, somebody who has called in from Hawaii, for example, earlier this year. That's perfectly fine. Everybody's okay with that. I mean, I think it's stated somewhere in the expectations that if you're going to be gone for an extended length of time, well, you may want to work that out. But in general, that has not been an issue yet. I don't expect it to be, and it's not something that should prevent somebody from considering joining the jury.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. So before we move on to training and support, I'm wondering if any of our panelists would like to add to this conversation around time management and the role of the grand jury.
I'd like to say one quick thing.
Please.
I guess I want to emphasize that people have to be aware that we do have a number of different meetings, and part of the kind of the time commitment associated with that is being able to attend these meetings, over video conference during work hours, which is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So usually try to work out something that works for everybody, but if you don't expect to be able to attend any meetings during normal business hours, then that may be make things more difficult for you.
And the only thing I'd also like to add to that, as Jim alluded to, there is flexibility in when you can attend a meeting, and being on, we use Teams, which is similar to Zoom, that you can take a meeting if you're not necessarily at your house or you're at an in-person meeting, and the court will provide you with the guidelines to always maintain confidentiality. If you are not, if he's in Hawaii, you can't, for example, be on a public Wi-Fi, but the court can help you with that. And we've been fortunate enough to have people that are very tech savvy on both juries that can help you with that. So confidentiality, I keep harping on that, but that's really critical to the work that we do. Thank you.
Excellent points. Thank you.
Brittany, can I add something?
Please.
I want to follow on what Tom said. When I first, I must not have read all of the fine print. So I did not catch on to the notion of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday in my eagerness to join the civil grand jury. So I was thinking, oh, nights and weekends, yeah, sure. And then it was like, oh no, we meet between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and not on court holidays. So I think that's just for me, it was like, oh, I was going to do it at night, and no, we meet during the day, and that's all. So thanks.
Thank you. And we will help with all that fine print at the required orientation and training at the start of the 2025-2026 term. But so pivoting to training, Tom, I'm wondering if you can talk to us a bit about the type of support, the trainings that is provided to those who serve on the civil grand jury.
Right. And we have a few people that might talk about that. So I'll go ahead and just talk about a little bit of the technical aspect of it. Um, uh, Brittany has always been someone that helps the grand jury kind of get up to speed with the technical side of things. This 2024 to 25 term is the first time we're using Microsoft SharePoint fully, and it doesn't necessarily have to be software that you are completely familiar with at this moment, but the training involved, especially at the beginning, would involve how to use Microsoft SharePoint to share documents, share um, uh, uh, sh- um, share documents, share all the data that's collected, and we also use other Microsoft tools, Microsoft Word. These are all licensed by the court for you, so you will have full access to the Microsoft suite for Word, Excel, for Outlook. You are given an email address that you use Outlook for. And so all these software packages, something that a lot of people have access to, but many don't, or they haven't had experience with that. So there are going to be trainings available to make sure people get up to speed with that. And during the course of the term, um, we get kind of put into different standing committees to help uh, deal with things. I'm the head of the tech committee, and so the part of the role of the tech committee is to help other jurors with some aspects um, of the technical side and using the software to make sure things run smoothly.
And I think that really demonstrates what we talked about earlier in terms of leveraging skills of different jurors. So thank you for sharing that, Tom. Leslie, would you mind sharing your experience with training and support?
Sure. What I found fascinating was I was very keenly interested in sort of the whole process of the civil grand jury and how this thing works as a critical part of the Superior Court. And so actually day one and day two of our experience here was 2 full days of training performed by various members of the court, the deputy county counsel and assistant deputy county counsel and other members of the Superior Court. So we had lots of training about what's going on, as Joanne said, sort of civics 101, what's going on inside the county, who's who in the zoo, and how things work. And that continued on with additional training from an organization called the California Grand Juries, Civil Grand Jury Association of California, who was training that the county procures for the civil grand jury. We went through all kinds of familiarization of exactly how the process works. We're given incredible amounts of documentation, and the trainings are live and they are experiential. You go through and do exercises as a group during the trainings. And there are also other timed trainings later on in the year, such as now moving on to report writing, offered by the Civil Grand Jury Association of California. In addition, there's an entire training manual that's been documented over the years for Santa Clara County, our specific. So you may be learning in general how civil grand juries work through the California training, but this is how we do it inside of Santa Clara County. And there's lots of materials and trainings on that. Additionally, just to add on to what Tom was saying, there is also ongoing technical support and training throughout the entire year, performed both by the technology team, Tom and his team, but also by Britney. So Britney is a superstar with all things Microsoft, SharePoint, and everything. And there's probably nothing we could throw her that she hasn't been able to decode for us. I think also just just specific, I'm the foreperson pro tem for this year's grand jury, and Lauren Diamond and I have been through trainings also by the Civil Grand Jury Association of California that's brought us into contact with other forepersons and pro tems around the state. So that's also an additional part of training. So I could go on, but just a smattering. You get lots of support, lots of training, and just encourage you to tune in and dive in.
Thank you, Leslie. I didn't even have to pay her to say that. So, Joanne, especially having served as a holdover, could you talk a bit about your perspective on this training and support?
I really can't add anything more to what's already been said. The only thing a little beyond the training is that we always, and Leslie alluded to that, is that we have ongoing support. There are times when if we are unable to find something, we can call Britney, and it's amazing how she knows when things were done, or if we're looking for a past report, or we're just looking for a site, or what do we need? She is extremely, extremely helpful. And then also Judge Emede mentioned that we do have county counsel as a support. So you are not out there alone. These two are very dedicated to the grand jury, and they are available to help us. And that's their role, is to help us to make the right decisions, and then if we do publish a report, that it meets all of the legal standards.
Thank you, Joanne. So we are going to move into the investigative side. I've seen a couple questions in the chat about this. So Lauren, I'm going to start with you if that's okay, and ask if you could touch on navigating these investigations, both from a practical standpoint. I see there's questions about how you choose things, and then also how you meet your legal mandate in that process.
Sure. So, as I said before, we do receive complaints from citizens in the county that we review. Just because we get a complaint doesn't mean that we have to do something with it. So, as a jury, we have the ability to kind of pick and choose what we think would be interesting for us to focus on. And so, depending on the volume of complaints, we may have to look elsewhere for, things that are happening in the news, that kind of thing. If somebody has something they're particularly passionate about that they want to talk to the jury about, then we may just decide to write an internal complaint from there. And the way we do that is we meet as an entire body, the plenary meeting, once a week for several hours. And we go through all of our kind of committee updates and any general kind of updates that we need to give, news from Britney, things like that. Sometimes we have guest speakers at plenary, but we do complaint review at plenary as well. And so that's when everybody gets to go through, and we've gone through in the trainings how to evaluate these complaints that we receive. So we go through and look at that, and then everyone has an opportunity to speak if they so wish. As we're discussing a complaint, we can, go back and forth a little bit. People do research, even prior to those complaints coming. So, I post an agenda with the complaints that we're going to be looking at this week, so people can read the complaints, kind of dig in, do a little Googling, and see what they come up with. And so then we have a pretty rich discussion about things that we're interested in and things that we think are either out of our jurisdiction or maybe not ripe for the jury at this point. So that's kind of how we pick the topics that we're going to focus on. And so from there, we form investigative committees, and that's all volunteer as well. The only requirement is that we don't have a supermajority, so not everyone on the jury is going to be on each IC. We try to limit it to 9 on the most people, and probably about 3 is the smallest we'd get for the other side of it. But from there, we will we take volunteers, then we ask people to volunteer to be the chairperson, to take on other roles. And so, like I mentioned, we do interviews, we do document requests, we do just our own research online. And so everyone in the committee just kind of takes on a different role. And so it really just varies between the different committees. And the idea is that if we're doing an investigative committee, we may produce a report on it. It doesn't mean that we have to produce a report on it. So it could be that we get into an investigation, we do a couple of interviews, and we all kind of look at each other and say, I don't know, that doesn't seem like there's anything there, and we close the investigation. We could do something like that and then write a report saying, well, we received complaints and we investigated and we didn't find anything. So it seems to us that everything is going well. So there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of different options on how we can handle that going forward. And then I did see there was a question about the reports. So each IC, if there is a report that's going to be written, each IC is responsible for that. We generally assign maybe a couple of lead writers. There's a lot of, if you've read any of our previous reports, there's a lot of different sections. So, everyone again has a part in doing that. We review it within the committee. And then once we're ready, we take that to plenary, and everyone in plenary takes a look at it. And we don't need to have anything be unanimous. It's always majority. So for reports to pass, we need a supermajority, which is 12 of 19 for our current jury. So As long as we have 12 people that say, yep, they're supporting this, they're good to go, then we go through multiple other rounds of revisions. We have an editorial committee that helps us review for language and consistency, things like that. Brittany goes through and does the review. We have legal reviews. So there's a lot that goes into just editing the report before it's presented to the judge for approval at the end. So that's a lot. I will let Leslie see if she has anything to add to that.
Wow, you covered the kind of the whole gambit. It's I really like the idea that we all, as everybody has said, we all come to this adventure with varying different backgrounds and skills and interests and abilities. And so it really is possible to participate in lots of different ways that you're comfortable with, or try something new. So you could really stretch your skills and say, I've never written something like this, but I'm going to try, start one paragraph at a time, and you find out, how supportive the whole experience is. Or I'm going to challenge myself with technology, or I'm going to support the team with technology. Or there's always a need for someone to be very organized and keep agendas and minutes and track of everything that's going on. So there's it's a very, very interesting and organic process but it's very well documented as to sort of the flow of how an investigation or an inquiry begins. And so it's you're not left to your own devices to figure out how to move from A to B to C. It is a documented process, and there are all kinds of tools. And I mean things like charts and um, things to fill in to capture the information that you're gleaning from the documents or information requests or interviews, so you can keep track of that as you're going, because it's kind of a long year if you do some interviews up front and you're like, what did that person say? So we capture that along the way, and we're trained to use these particular tools to do that. So there's lots of support. It's you're not cast into the wilderness to figure this out. So it's a great experience, though. Thanks.
Brittany, I see that there's several questions in the chat about like a typical week. You want us to touch on that now?
Please do, yes.
Yep. So as I mentioned, we've got a lot of different standing committees. For example, Tom mentioned the tech committee. I mentioned the editorial committee. We have a complaint committee, and each jury decides on what those committees are going to be and how they're going to run business. And then, so it's up to you to decide. First we look at just the standing committees and we say, okay, as a jury, we decided we want these 6 committees. People volunteer for those committees, knowing that there is going to be some commitment with volunteering for that, right? You'll probably have a fairly regular meeting once a week for that committee. And then, like I said, for the ICs as well, the investigative committees, we take volunteers as well. So it's really up to everybody to decide how involved or how much time they can devote. And that's why the 20 to 25 hour, it ebbs and flows, right? If we're in the middle of report writing season, then it's definitely going to be a heavier commitment on everyone's part in the early months when we're still trying to kind of get our feet on the ground. And there may be quieter weeks where that drops down to, maybe you have a couple of meetings and that's it. And I did mention we have plenary every week, so it varies across, what you've signed up to do. So.
One thing I would add is, as Lauren talked about the various standing committees, some of them have more critical, time-consuming roles at the beginning of the year, and then they kind of fall away, and then others ramp up. So as you can imagine, editorial committee has lower number of hours required at the beginning of the year, but will higher number at the end of the year. Whereas like the complaint committee is very busy at the beginning of the year and it tapers, but it doesn't end. The same with maybe the compliance committee. So it kind of bobs and weaves, and so the time commitments change. And then many times we have meetings where we check in, we talk about 2 things, and 15 minutes, we're done. And we're very efficient. We don't hang on and and everybody gets back to whatever else they were doing.
Wonderful. Thank you for addressing those questions from the chat as well as speaking to these investigations. Would any of our other panelists like to add to this discussion about the investigative side before we move on? Okay, well, hearing none, I do have a question I'm hoping that, Joanne, you can please start with answering, is about what you would tell someone who is contemplating applying for serving on the 2025-2026 grand jury.
I would like to start that you heard from some of us, it wasn't something we had really maybe planned on doing. But you just said, maybe, you know, try it, you may like it. And I have served on both civil and criminal juries in the past. And I came to this particular volunteer opportunity because I saw a flyer while I was outside of the courtroom waiting to be called back in. And if you really like volunteering, it is a very different kind of volunteering. It is very meaningful, and it does make a difference for our community. Also, curiosity. I say curiosity, you start doing an investigation, you get curious about this, you get curious about that, and that leads to very meaningful types of research and invest in that whole investigatory process and what I like to look at, who would I like to talk to. We talked about being open-minded. The judge referenced bias, and that can kind of be an unconscious bias, which we are also trained about how to recognize our own biases. We talked about working in a team. You may have all experienced working in a team. It's a little different in that what Lauren mentioned, you can't just die on every hill. That's the best way for me to put it, because it is a group decision. If we get 12 people, sometimes you can't just, you have to speak up. Let me back up. You have to speak up. If you have an idea, just because one person may have a different idea is not a reason to speak up. Everybody should talk. Everybody should speak up. And in the end, you have to temper that with where we are going. It's a very unique team situation in that you don't have like one boss that says, Lauren says, well, no, this is how we're going to do it. That is not the role of the foreperson. It is the group of 12 that makes up that decision. But what makes everything good is that everybody says, I see there's a pitfall here, or we could add something here. I like learning. So for me, it was just a whole new way of keeping up my learning and keeping my mind active. And it's not a social club, yet as Leslie mentioned, we were all strangers. We came together, and I am still friends with, I know with people that were on the prior jury, with this jury, and you just make those bonds because of the kind of work we are doing. And we've mentioned before also that it's a shared knowledge. Everybody brings something. Everybody has a different work experience, technical experience, whatever it is, that really makes this all work. So if you are considering it, please, I would ask you at least go to the next step, consider getting interviewed, unless we've said something here that you say, well, I'm planning a trip around the world and that's starting in July, then you might not go for this jury, you might go for the next jury, but do please consider it is very, very rewarding work. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. And Susan, what advice would you offer?
I'll be brief, but I think that there's really a way for everyone to plug in. I think the really varied backgrounds make it really possible for people to find the right way to connect with a grand jury and to participate. As a member of the grand jury, you'll play a vital role in holding local government accountable, ensuring that public institutions operate fairly, and transparently and in the best interest of the people they serve. For me, it's been a really great experience taking part in the investigations and allowing me to participate in the formulation of reports that deal with substantive issues. I've really enjoyed the work. I've enjoyed, the interactions with my colleagues and with the learning that's associated with each of our investigations. As others have mentioned, I encourage you to look at the website and read some of the reports and get a feel for the grand jury's work, because I think that tells volumes. And with that, I'll just close it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Jim and then Tom what you would share to someone considering applying?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brittany. And thanks to everyone again for attending today. So what would I tell someone contemplating serving on the grand jury? Two words come to mind, and we've heard them both today a number of times, and I have a feeling most of us would probably say something similar. But the first word is opportunity. And what is this opportunity and what it might mean to you? Well, it's going to vary by individual, and depending on the different journey that has brought you to this point here today. I mean, maybe you're retired, looking for something new to do. Maybe you'd like to find a way to be of service to your community. Maybe you'd simply like to take on a new challenge and try something brand new. Or maybe you'd like to use your unique set of skills and experience, whether that's work experience or life experience. For any and all of these possible reasons, I mean, this is an opportunity to jump in and contribute. And maybe, like all of you, I'm sure, I mean, you have an interest in local government, how it functions, finding ways to help it improve, and holding local government agencies, as Susan said, accountable, because that's the second word, accountability. If you've ever read something in the newspaper, and yes, there are few of us who still get the paper delivered every day. If you've ever read something and thought, why the heck would they do that or do it that way, or how can they get away with that? Well, this is your chance, your opportunity to get in there, learn about how the proverbial sausage is made, come up with ideas and recommendations on how to improve a process or hold someone accountable for fulfilling the promise of the local agency has made to the community, and you can participate in that. I'm done.
Okay. I guess from my perspective, you know, we all live in, Santa Clara County. Santa Clara County is very large. It's very complex, and there's so many departments. It's not something that I've really paid as much attention to uh, until I joined the Civil Grand Jury. Um, it's been a really great learning experience for me. Um, it's not only just Googling things and searching for things, and there is quite a lot to learn just from doing that. But part of our investigations involve a lot of interviews, and those interviews are interviews with people that n normally people would never be able to have an opportunity to speak to. These are people in charge of different departments throughout the county, and they give you very firsthand knowledge and detail about how different parts of the county works, and it's been fascinating. And but of course, this is also an opportunity to figure out, well, does this make sense the way they've been doing it? Because it is a large bureaucracy as well. And so there are certain aspects of the county that would benefit from kind of a third party looking in. And we don't have explicit I saw a question. We don't have explicit enforcement power on things, but a lot of what we do is a lot of people have said kind of bring sunshine to certain problems, more so than maybe the Mercury News does. They're able to bring attention to certain things, but um, the civil grand jury has a lot of power to kind of dig even deeper, and bring things to light. And when our reports come out, our recommendations come out, the idea is that these various departments by law, are supposed to respond to these recommendations. Whether or not they follow it is a different story. But in many cases, we do follow through to see what's going on with that. The Mercury News does pick, and other organizations, they do pick up when these reports are released, and depending on the type of report, they bring it to the public, and bring attention to it even more. So, um, it's definitely a rewarding experience in those ways.
Excellent. Thank you both for that advice and for sharing your perspective. I know we are almost to 1 o'clock here, but I do want to invite if there's anyone from the audience who would like to unmute and pose a question to our panelists, we have a few minutes for that. Okay, well then hearing none, I do want to share a quick slide about the court's ongoing recruitment, which I think everyone here has heard a lot about. There was a question in the chat about the criteria for grand jurors, about the selection process, and I think our panelists have pointed to the website quite a bit. All of that information and the application to serve on the civil grand jury can be found on the court's public website. That URL is listed here. I also have listed the email address, cgj@scscourt.org, where you can absolutely send questions, comments, any issues you're running into with the application. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I've dropped my direct line in the chat as well. Happy to answer any questions that we did not address today, but the applications are due in a little over a month, almost two. So it is on March 28th. We do again have that application entirely fillable online, and this is for the term that is starting July 1st of 2025. So in the application, you will see there are some required dates. This is a little contrary to the flexibility that we've talked about today, but there are only a handful of required dates for grand jurors. One of them is that random selection, which will be on June the 18th. One of them is the orientation and the reading of the charge, where Judge Emede will actually tell the new panel about your responsibilities and the case law that requires the grand jury to look at things like inspecting the public detention facilities in the county. And then on July 2nd, there is a legal training where county counsel's office will go over, those guidelines. And which reminds me, there was a question in the chat. The grand jury does have subpoena power, and you will have access to legal advice from county counsel's office on the use of that subpoena power. So please, again, don't hesitate to reach out. We will be making the recording of this event available in a few days. So please be on the lookout for that email. But before I close this out today, I do just want to ask that you join me for a round of applause for our excellent panel. I think it was very helpful and insightful for Lauren, Tom, Susan, Jim, Leslie, and Joanne to share their perspective sort of behind the curtain of serving on the civil grand jury. So thank you. And thank you all for being here. I'm excited to hear feedback on today's event and on speaking with you about your interest in applying to the civil grand jury. Okay, thanks so much. And I'm going to go ahead and end the recording and stop today's meeting. And I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.